And at this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Sophie Lucas. Sophie Lucas is a lived experience coordinator for Project Air Strategy. Sophie also works as a peer educator for NSW Health in Australia and is a mental health advocate. Working alongside clinicians at Project Air Strategy, Sophie shares her insights and lived experience of BPD, trauma, and other diagnoses. Co-facilitating a peer and clinician-led group, Sophie helps open up conversations and continues to try to break down the stigma surrounding complex mental illness and borderline personality disorder by creating safe spaces for others to talk about their own experiences. As a lived experience worker within the group, she shares the stories of getting through tough times and reflects on times when different skills are put into practice. When not working, Sophie enjoys being with friends, going to concerts, and indulging in many enjoyable hobbies.
And we're going to share, Sophie is actually with us from Australia. She'll be able to answer any comments in the chat during her presentation. But due to internet issues, we are going to be sharing Sophie's video. And this is just a note for those that are running tech, is that Sophie's video is 13 minutes. And that will mean that this will roll a few seconds into the next presentation.
I want to start with a massive thank you to Paula and Sarah and everyone at Emotions Matter for this amazing opportunity. I'm on the unceded territory of the Wurdi people, who are the traditional owners of Dharawal country, and I pay my respects to elders both past and present. I'm on the south coast of New South Wales, about 90 minutes south of Sydney, right by the beach. This is one of the beaches. Being where I am, I would have imagined myself to be more relaxed and cruisy about this, but like everything important I do, I've definitely spent a lot of time being critical and overthinking it. What am I going to say? How am I going to say it? Will it come across for an international audience? I feel I had a very chaotic start to life. I didn't have a lot of stability. Moving around a lot, I felt like I didn't fit in at school. I also felt like I didn't know exactly who I was, which is a wild feeling as a kid. I also remember feeling very big feelings. A lot of what I felt seemed as big as a high-rise building, and I was the only occupant, while everyone around me saw me as just being overly dramatic. I was 12 when I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety and started on antidepressants. They helped to an extent. I still felt as though I didn't fit in at school. I still didn't know who I was. I was constantly changing what I could about myself. My hair, my fashion, my favorite bands, just trying to figure out who I am, trying to fit in, even though a part of me thought that that could never happen. I still had very big emotions, but I was also starting to feel empty from time to time. As I continued my way through high school, I saw plenty of therapists, yet not a lot made sense or seemed to change. I did like talking to them though. I found new ways to cope and survive. They were not the greatest things to be doing, but it was those survival skills that helped when I didn't know how else to. I finished high school and I still felt lost. I still had no stability, moving out of home, back home on many occasions, trying out many jobs in different short courses, trying to find something I enjoy. That feeling of not fitting in, of not knowing what I wanted to do with my life, whilst everyone around me seemed to know what they were doing and how to get there. That was very dominant. I had friends who looked like they had their whole lives planned out ahead of them tell me that I'll figure it out, so I kept trying. I was also still trying with therapy. Some of it was helpful for certain situations, but with everything else going on, it was hard and disheartening. Things were getting dark and grim, crying all the time but not knowing why, feeling so empty and not knowing what to do with that, trying whatever I could just to feel something. When I wasn't crying or on another adventure to try and feel something else, I was angry. I didn't feel heard, and that made me angrier. I ended up having my first admission to a mental health unit. Things seemed slightly smoother once I was back home, and I soon had the opportunity to move overseas. I got a passport and a one-way ticket to London. I loved my time in London, but I also had my struggles. A lot of the things I was probably running away from had followed. About a year and a half later, I came home, full of adventure, but also full of sadness and weirdly shame. I spent which still now feels like a very long time trying to find my place in the world, trying to understand who I am. It was starting to feel like the older I got, the more wild my emotions felt. Then the longer I felt empty, the more erratic the outburst was. The survival strategies became more riskier. I had a few more admissions to the mental health unit, as well as plenty of visits to the emergency department. One time when I was admitted to the unit, I remember being called into a room by someone I'd never seen before and who I'll never seen again. They asked a lot of questions, and it felt like we were in the room for a few hours till I got told I was being diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Then they left the room. I had no idea what it was. No other staff talked to me about the diagnosis, so I felt like I wasn't allowed to talk about it. It was when staff were getting me ready to leave the unit that I got told that the only thing will help me is a type of therapy called dialectical behavior therapy. Of course, my mind immediately went to worst case scenario of, what if it doesn't help? Will I have to live in a mental health facility forever? I kept those thoughts to myself, went home, and ended up back in hospital again a few weeks later. I was still a mess and nothing made sense, and causing chaos was easier. At the same time, I was also looking for peace. The following year, I started DBT after going through a long process with the psychologist to make sure I was suitable for the group. I still didn't know much about BPD or DBT. No one gave information, and I was too anxious to ask. Google wasn't giving much hope either, just plenty of negativity. So me having BPD didn't make sense. Surely I was just depressed and anxious. I just found new ways to get through the pain that others didn't understand. I went along to the DBT group just to make others around me happy. It didn't last long. I felt like I didn't belong in that room, so I ghosted my first DBT group. I'd also been booked in with a psychologist who was helping with the DBT to do individual schema-focused therapy at the same time. That site called me, wanting me to continue the schema therapy, and I went along with it just to get out of the house. Schema is hard, and I was resisting, and my walls were up. But then something changed. The site could see I wasn't trusting, could see my uncertainty, and asked what could possibly help with that. I'd never experienced this before, so I thought about it for a while. Therapy is a lot of being asked questions, so I thought, what if I were to ask some questions? Just wanting to find some common interests, break down the power imbalance. And it was allowed. I asked a few questions, learned a few interests about the psychologist, and just being able to ask those questions made such a difference. A lot of my protective walls began dropping. I learned about BPD, and we put the things together about why I got given the diagnosis. A lot of things were starting to make a lot of sense. I was only able to see this psychologist for that year, and the closer it got towards the end, the more I felt my walls going back up, and the psychologist also noticed. For once, it felt like things are working out for me and making sense for it all to be taken away. I found a new psychologist who also uses schema therapy, and I was referred for an appointment. I was allowed to ask a few questions within the first session, wanting to find a common interest or two, and that has definitely made working with the psychologist much easier. I'm sure not everyone wants to know about their therapist's interests, and I'm sure there's therapists who may not feel comfortable sharing their interests. But I've since learned it's about finding the things that work for you, the things that you need, and learning to ask if those needs can be met. While going through all of these big changes of learning about BPD, learning more about myself, trying new types of therapy, I'd also returned to study. I thought I'd finally knew what I wanted to do career-wise, but it didn't work out. A few other things were also going on, and it felt as though everything happened all at once, and I seemed to relapse. I'd been slowly relying on past survival skills. Healing definitely isn't linear, and before I knew it, I was back to being in and out of the emergency and the mental health unit. This time around, it seemed less helpful than the previous time. No matter what I did, how hard I tried, even when I was finally asking for help, it wasn't there. I was tired of it all, and I made plans. I couldn't live with this hopelessness. My best friend, despite being on the other side of the world, had some very different plans for me. I got told to check my email, and I saw she'd bought me tickets to see The Cursed Child for the following year. I promised myself that I've got to keep living till then, and then I can go ahead with my plans. It was exhausting getting through each day, fighting my own thoughts to stay alive. I needed something to help pass time by quicker, so I decided to start studying again. I enrolled into a mental health peer worker course. I had no idea what a peer worker was, but I knew a lot about mental health, so I assumed it could be easy. I was also back in the same situation of feeling like I had to keep others happy by doing therapy I didn't really want to do. When I was still in hospital, a few of the staff wanted me to go to another facility, which I kept refusing. I said I'd rather do a DBT program again, but that request seemed to go unheard. I listened to my own advice, and I did find another DBT group, as well as trying a few other things, trying to find the hope that was lost. Eventually, I found it. I felt I knew more about DBT, knowing that I need to put in the work and practice the skills for it to be beneficial. I continued studying, learning what peer work is, learning what a peer worker does. A peer worker uses their own lived experience to walk alongside others, hold hope for others when times are tough, to help guide towards the things we want. And instead of asking what's wrong with you, as there's nothing wrong with us, we ask what happened. Learning about all of this brought me more hope back into my own life. It sounded like something I really could have benefited from ages ago. And I was also feeling a lot of big feelings about why peer support was never offered to me or never even spoken about. I kept my promise and I went and saw the cursed child. I had a fantastic time. I didn't forget about the plans I'd made. I just didn't realize how much things can change and the plans were packed away. I'm not going to say I'm completely cured and it's no longer something I think about, but when I do think about it, I realize I now have more things to live for and to look forward to. If I don't have anything to look forward to, I get something organized. Even as simple as organizing brunch with a friend, finding a concert I want to go to and buying tickets, putting my name down for a yoga class, having a craft afternoon with friends. I finished the mental health peer worker course during the first year of the pandemic. Pandemic is rough for everyone in many ways. Quite a lot has happened since then. Tough times that I once pictured I'd never survive. Times that could have had me sprinting towards those plans that are now packed away. I'm now able to do the things I know I need in order to keep moving forward. I still go to therapy, try not to be so hard on myself, and trying to remember that I deserve rest as well as doing the things that I enjoy. I'm doing peer work now. There's definitely rough moments in this role that get me down. I actually got teary at work a few weeks back, but I was able to debrief with my supervisors. I'm also so grateful that I'm working alongside researchers and clinicians who are leaders in providing research and education to help improve services and promote recovery for people with personality disorders and complex mental illness. So I feel able to be my emotional self. It would be great if more workplaces could allow for big emotions. Imagine how much more productive we could be if we can make time and space at work to have a big cry, go outside and scream, or to actually slow down and enjoy a cup of tea. Being a peer worker and advocate for mental illness, sharing my experiences, my story, continuously trying to smash the stigma, all of that helped bring me here today. Being able to share more of my story, meeting other people doing amazing work and providing support and hope for others. I'm proud of myself that I stuck around, despite sometimes feeling like I'm living purely out of spite. If it helps, it helps. I'm pleased that I can say that I'm proud of myself. I remember being told in a DBT group one day that some people are like daisies. It doesn't matter the environment or the weather, they can grow through any sort of shit life throws at them. Other people are like orchids. They need the right kind of soil, the right environment, consistent weather, a watering routine, ongoing care and upkeep. I just needed to find the places that meet my needs, the care and treatment that works for me, friends that become family, continuing to share my experiences, leaning into my strengths and staying curious, and holding hope for everyone who may describe themselves as orchids, that they will one day find what's needed to keep growing and bloom. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Please join us at our next Our next session, the research on BPD and recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie, for joining us from Australia and for that beautiful presentation. You could feel free to connect with Sophie on our Sullivan's app by finding her name and sending her a message. See you at the next session, everybody.